How to Kill a Vampire. 800 guns firing at once. Tens of thousands of bullets hit his body, but he didn't dodge or dodge. He kept moving forward against the rain of bullets. His body was beaten like a hornet's nest. 10 minutes later he finally fell down. Look at the vampire on the ground. The enemy burst out laughing, but the next moment, the fallen vampire emits an eerie and sinister laugh. A blood moon rises in the sky. The vampire's body begins to regenerate quickly. This vampire named Alucard, he is fully healed once again. He is the most powerful vampire killer in Hellsing's organization. He is also the immortal king of vampires, domesticated by humans. The story takes place in a small town. One day there was a paranormal phenomenon. Several police officers come to investigate, and the vampire priest in front of them is sucking blood. Apparently, he turned into a vampire. With a wave of his hand, a large number of ghouls crawled out of the side. The three men hurriedly raised their guns and fired, but it didn't help at all. Soon the whole village was a ghoul's lair. The police sent a large number of elites to support them, but these ghouls are controlled by vampires. Ordinary guns and bullets have no effect on them. Instead, these people became ghoul food. Only the policewoman Sarah's managed to escape. So, they had no choice but to seek help from the Hellsing organization. This organization is a mysterious organization that specializes in dealing with supernatural creatures. Standing before them is the leader of the organization, Integra. She sent Alucard, Hellsing's most powerful vampire killer, to the scene. At this time, the vampire priest is torturing Sarah's. Suddenly, he realizes danger is approaching and turns around to see Alucard standing in front of him. Upon learning that it was Alucard, the vampire priest immediately ordered his subordinates to open fire. With overwhelming firepower, Alucard is riddled with bullets. Looking at the corpses on the ground, the vampire priest was extremely proud of himself. At that moment, the blood moon appeared. Alucard comes back to life to the surprise of the vampire priest. He pulls a fully automatic silver pistol out of his pocket. It is 39 centimeters long and 20 kilograms heavy, loaded with 13 millimeters of exploding armor-piercing rounds with bullet heads made from the Vatican's silver cross. Alucard starts shooting around and quickly kills the surrounding ghouls. All that was left was the terrified vampire priest. To survive, he took Sarah's hostage, but Alucard suddenly asks if Sarah's is a virgin. After receiving an answer, Alucard shoots and pierces Sarah's lungs and the vampire priest's heart with one shot. At this point, Sarah's is on the ground. Her breath is already weak, but she didn't want to die yet. Her parents were killed and she didn't get her revenge. She didn't want to die like that. Suddenly Alucard grabbed her hand. When Sarah's wakes up again, she finds that her gunshot wounds have completely disappeared, and she has turned into a vampire. The place where Sarah's is located is the headquarters of the Hellsing organization. After becoming a vampire, Integra lets her become a member of the organization. That night, Alucard takes Sarah's on a mission. However, Alucard is completely indifferent to these low-level vampires. Under Alucard's relentless fire, the male vampire convulses in pain. Finally, with one stab of Alucard's hand knife, the male vampire is finished. At this moment Sarah's is on the roof aiming at another fleeing vampire. However, the other side has already run 500 or 600 meters away. Now it is night, and Sarah's can't aim at all. Under Alucard's guidance, Sarah's eyes suddenly turn red, and she can see the female vampire thousands of meters away clearly. Then she shoots decisively, and the bullet penetrates directly into the female vampire's heart. On the other hand, Integra has noticed a recent surge in vampire-related killings, as if someone is randomly creating vampires. To uncover the conspiracy behind it, Integra sends Alucard and Sarah's to investigate. Facing a room full of ghouls, Alucard shoots them one by one. Then Sarah's breaks in and shoots at the ghouls in front of her. The constant killing awakens the vampire power in her body, and Sarah's begins to adapt to her new vampire body. It was as if she was in the middle of an endless killing spree. With the last ghoul destroyed, Sarah's looked at the blood on his hands, involuntarily wanted to lick a mouthful. Suddenly a steel knife pierced her body from behind, shocking Alucard, who was standing nearby. In the next second, dozens of steel knives pierced Sarah's body. These steel knives with sculptures can slow the vampire's ability to recover. Immediately afterwards, countless golden Bibles were plastered all over the room. A tall figure slowly emerged from the darkness. The man was Father Anderson, the most powerful warrior of the 13th section of the Vatican Betrayer Agency, specialized in killing supernatural beings. Because he always holds two steel swords, he can keep firing at the enemy like a bullet. Biblical runes on knife handles, used to slow vampires' self-healing. Upon hearing Anderson would meet Alucard, Integra flew quickly to the outskirts of the area on a plane. At that moment, Anderson and Alucard walked slowly towards each other, arms drawn almost simultaneously. Alucard was stabbed in the neck with 2 knives, but still raised his gun and shot Anderson in the head. Anderson fell to the ground. Alucard then pulled up the steel knife he had stabbed into his body. He admired Anderson's courage in fighting vampires at night, but the next moment his expression froze. Anderson reappeared behind him. 2 steel knives penetrated Alucard's body again. Alucard flew forward and pulled out his silver gun at the same time. He shot backwards continuously. Anderson was caught off guard and fell to the ground again, but soon he got up again and ran towards Alucard. In the end, Alucard's speed was not enough, and he was pinned to the wall by Anderson's steel blades. Meanwhile, Anderson's body, which had previously been shot by bullets, was quickly repairing itself. It turned out Anderson's body had been modified to give him the same healing ability as a vampire. Anderson then threw countless steel blades with both hands, nailing Alucard to the wall. He then raised his weapon, directly decapitating Alucard and laughing maniacally at his victory. Anderson didn't expect the legendary king of vampires, Hellsing's ace, to be so easily defeated, but when he turned his head to look, there was only a pool of blood on the ground, and Ceres had already fled with Alucard's head in her arms. However, she was badly wounded and didn't get far before a steel blade flew towards her, nailing Alucard's head against the wall. As Anderson approached her step by step, Ceres tried to break the window and escape, but the area was surrounded by a powerful barrier she couldn't break through. Just then, some blood words appeared on the ground. It was Alucard's blood. He allowed Ceres to drink his blood, which would give her powerful strength. As Ceres hesitated, Anderson had already raised his blade and was closing in on her from behind, but Integra arrived just in time. Integra had intended to drive Anderson away in an official capacity, but he ignored her orders and began attacking her subordinates. He even tried to kill Integra himself. Integra looked at Anderson with sarcasm and told him that he would soon be resurrected. Just then, the blood moon appeared again, and countless bats flew in. Breaking through the barrier, Alucard, who had died earlier, was revived again, but this time even stronger. Father Anderson tried to cut off Alucard's arms, but they quickly healed at a visible speed. Looking at the Alucard in front of him, Anderson knew he was no match and took out a Bible, ready to teleport away. Alucard was disappointed, because he felt that such a fight could only be considered a warm-up. Ceres sits on the ground in a state of shock. Alucard asks her why she didn't drink her own blood earlier. Ceres felt that if she drank his blood she would become a real vampire, and she wasn't ready for that. But she didn't know that, if she drank Alucard's blood just now, defeating Anderson was a breeze. On this day, a mysterious man arrived at the Hellsing headquarters. As he carefully admired the paintings on the wall, countless steel spears flew out from the paintings, pinning him to the wall. A large group of soldiers quickly appeared before him, but what the soldiers saw were only men's clothes. Just as they were puzzled, a silver light flashed, beheading one of the soldiers. The man appeared unharmed in front of them. Other soldiers, witnessing the scene, quickly opened fire. Faced with the intense attack from behind, the man transformed into a blur of light and appeared among them, with several flashes of silver light. All the soldiers were instantly killed. The man's name is Luke. Just minutes ago, he and his brother Jan arrived at the Hellsing headquarters. They immediately commanded the powerful firepower at their disposal to forcefully breach the entrance of the Hellsing headquarters. A large group of fully armed ghouls disembarked from the vehicles and stormed through the entrance of the Hellsing headquarters. The guards of Hellsing immediately launched an attack. But even if the ghouls had their heads blown off, they continued their advance. Soon, the soldiers on the entire floor were annihilated. Meanwhile, Integra was in a roundtable meeting with government officials. When she heard the news of the ghouls attacking the building, the high-ranking officials were drenched in cold sweat. Then, Jan's figure appeared on the screen, and he shamelessly humiliated Integra. Furious, Integra clenched her teeth and promptly dialed the butler Walter's phone. Upon hearing Integra's command, Walter's face filled with excitement. Alucard was also eager to witness his battle, since Walter, in his past, was as terrifying as the Grim Reaper. In the building of the Hellsing headquarters, Jan had already reached the floor where the meeting room was located. The front door opened. Walter came out. With a gentle movement of his palm, a silver light flew out, and the next second, the ghoul behind Jan was sliced in half. Jan was scared, his cold sweat flowing. He immediately ordered to open fire, but Walter swiftly threw out a steel wire. forming a defensive net, and quickly charged towards Jan. In his eyes, these bullets were simply too slow. With a pull of the steel wire in his hand, the ghouls behind Jan's body exploded, turning into blood. However, Jan once again gathered a large group of ghouls and launched an attack. Walter remained unfazed because Sarah's was already ambushed behind the group of ghouls. Two explosions took out all the ghouls. Jan, in a frenzy, charged towards Walter, but his mouth was already caught by the steel wire. Walter gave a gentle pull, tearing Jan's lips apart. At that moment, Sarah's appeared behind him and pressed him to the ground. Walter stomped on his hand, breaking it, and inquired about his purpose for coming here. But Jan burst into laughter. A large group of ghouls appeared behind him again, and these ghouls were all transformed from the deceased soldiers of Hellsing. Taking advantage of the distraction, Jan broke free from the restraints and ran towards the meeting room. Walter quickly threw out a steel wire, tearing off his arm, but Jan ignored the pain and continued running forward. However, as he opened the door, several guns were already pointed at him. Meanwhile, Luke had found his way to the basement where Alucard was located. In the dimly lit room, Alucard was waiting impatiently. Luke, as a vampire, had admired Alucard since he was young, and now that he saw his idol, he wanted to kill him and take his place. As the glass fell, both of them drew their guns and shot each other in the head. Then, they simultaneously let out eerie laughter. Alucard, without lifting his head, continued shooting. Luke's reactions were swift, as he chatted with Alucard and dodged the bullets. However, Luke underestimated his opponent. Alucard didn't dodge his shots at all. Just when Luke thought he had one, Alucard started laughing excitedly. At the same time, his wounds from earlier had completely healed. Luke's strength had made Alucard take him seriously. Alucard classified him as an A-level vampire. Then he lifted his own seal. At that moment, Luke felt like he was in hell. Countless hellhounds surged out of Alucard's body. The terrifying scene frightened Luke, and he tried to escape. However, a pistol came out of the hellhound's mouth. It directly broke Luke's legs. Alucard approached Luke, demanding that he unleash all his power and fight him, but Luke was too scared at this point. Although they were both vampires, Luke saw Alucard as nothing short of a monster. At this point, Alucard lost interest in playing with Luke. He promptly killed him. On the other side, Jan, despite being shot multiple times, but ordinary bullets couldn't kill him. When the others asked about the mastermind behind the scenes, blue flames suddenly enveloped Jan's body. It turned out that a self-destruct mechanism was implanted in him. If he failed in his mission, the self-destruct mode would activate. Before dying, Luke uttered a single word: Millennium. Several days later, during a meeting between Integra and the head of the Vatican Section 13, she finally learned the meaning of that word. 50 years ago, during a war that engulfed all of Europe, a certain country, which had caused the flames of war, left behind a plan called Millennium upon its defeat. Now, the leader of this plan is none other than the former Nazi Major Montana. After Germany's defeat 50 years ago, Montana became a prisoner of war. At the moment of his imminent death, the Grim Reaper was attracted to his iron will. The surrounding blood gathered around him, promising that if he drank that blood, he would become immortal. However, faced with the temptation of eternal life, Montana uttered only two words: get lost. It was Montana's last shred of dignity as a human. He belonged only to himself. Afterward, through mechanical modification technology, Montana replaced everything below his head with mechanical parts, barely managing to survive. He then converted 3,000 of his soldiers into vampires, lurking in South America, waiting for the right moment to start a war. A few days ago, Montana launched an attack on the Hellsing headquarters. This battle caused heavy losses for Integra. Through the head of the Vatican's Section 13, Integra discovered that Montana had been lurking in South America. So, Integra dispatched Alucard to take the initiative and seek revenge. After arriving in South America, Alucard checked into a hotel. However, soon the entire building was surrounded by the local government forces, who claimed that there were two fully armed terrorists inside the hotel. It turned out that the high-ranking officials of the local government had already been controlled by Montana's vampires. Alucard's every move was under their surveillance. and they sent out assault teams to attack. Upon receiving the orders, these assault team members kicked open the room doors and immediately started shooting at Alucard. Under the intense firepower, Alucard was quickly riddled with bullets. For these commandos, it seemed like an easy accomplishment of the mission, but they were unaware that this was just the beginning of their nightmare. Suddenly, Alucard's body moved, and blood began to flow into his body. Alucard's visible wounds began to rapidly regenerate. To Alucard, those who worked for the vampires were like dogs. He then bit off the neck of a soldier in front of him, and transformed into a demonic figure, harvesting the lives of all the soldiers. Faced with such a terrifying monster, the last soldier chose to commit suicide. Alucard called Integra on the phone and asked for instructions on whether to continue killing the enemy. After contemplating for a moment, Integra made the final decision to crush all the enemies. Upon receiving Integra's orders, Alucard's killing spree truly began. All the assault team members hiding in the hotel were quickly eliminated by Alucard. He made his way from the top floor to the ground floor in just 5 minutes, leaving hundreds of soldiers dead in his wake. The remaining few assault team members were thrown out of the building by Alucard one by one. He then officially declared war on Montana. At this moment, one of Montana's henchmen, a master of playing cards named Tubalcan, stepped forward from the crowd. He knew that Alucard had limited special ammunition left, so he summoned playing cards and prepared to take down Alucard. The playing cards in his hands became sharp blades, effortlessly cutting through Alucard's face. He then threw out a large number of playing cards, displaying a terrifying killing power. Facing such a deadly attack, Alucard could only swiftly dodge, but the bystanders suffered from the onslaught. Alucard managed to shoot Tubalcan, but it turned out to be a body made of playing cards. The real Tubalcan appeared behind Alucard and knocked him down. Severely wounded, Alucard had no choice but to temporarily take refuge on the rooftop. It turns out that the playing cards used by Tubalcan are blessed by the Bible, causing vampires to have their regenerative abilities slowed down whenever they are struck by them. However, this only piqued Alucard's interest further. Next, he planned to make Tubalcan howl like a pig. Tubalcan was feeling extremely smug at the moment. He believed he had already won. He once again threw the card, though it hit him. For Alucard, who had unleashed his seal, it was merely a tickle. Soon, smoke engulfed the area, and Alucard's figure began to appear and disappear within the smoke. He grabbed Tubalcan's wrist, kicked and shattered his knee. At the same time, they unleashed their most powerful attacks. Amidst the pool of blood, Tubalcan began to wail like a pig. Alucard then lifted his face and sank his teeth into Tubalcan's neck. Through his blood, Alucard extracted Tubalcan's memories, and learned about Montana's plan to initiate a war. However, Montana was keeping a close eye on everything. Although Alucard was powerful, Montana had spent half a century building up strength to oppose him. Montana ordered the ship to immediately turn around, signaling the imminent outbreak of a war that would engulf the entire Europe. 50 years ago, Montana created a formidable vampire army, only to be annihilated by the vampire king Alucard and the young Walter. Now, Montana reappeared and had taken control of a British aircraft carrier, leading over 3,000 vampires in preparation for war. Their primary target was the capital city of London. After Montana seized the aircraft carrier, he sent Winkle, the magic bullet shooter, to take control of the ship. Her bullets had special abilities and would not stop until they destroyed all targets. The British military's missiles and fighter jets would easily be destroyed as long as they were within Winkle's range. To eliminate the threat posed by Montana, the Queen of England urgently summoned Alucard. It was their first meeting in 50 years. The Queen had met Alucard when she was only 18 years old. However, due to Alucard being a vampire, their relationship could only be that of friends. Now, it was a critical moment for London's survival. The Queen ordered Alucard to fully eliminate Montana's forces. However, Alucard couldn't fly and couldn't reach the area where the aircraft carrier was located. Any ordinary aircraft would be easily shot down by Winkle. Just then, Walter, the butler, proposed a plan. There was a reconnaissance aircraft called Blackbird that flew at 7 times the speed of sound, and had a maximum cruising altitude of 25,000 kilometers. It is capable of colliding with an aircraft carrier's deck before the magic bullets can intercept it. However, the impact force is too intense for an ordinary person to withstand, so only Alucard is capable of piloting it. Facing Winkle's magical bullet attacks, Alucard released his seal and transformed into his second form. He enveloped the entire fighter jet with his body. Watching Alucard in the sky, Winkle was stunned. Accompanied by a massive explosion, the fighter jet plunged straight into the aircraft carrier's deck, transforming into a flaming cross. In that moment, Winkle's expression twisted in fear. Alucard was like a demon from hell. He approached Winkle step by step. Suddenly, gunshots rang out as soldiers nearby began shooting frantically at Alucard, buying time for Winkle to escape. However, these soldiers were no match for Alucard. He transformed into his second form, extending numerous arms in the air. In the blink of an eye, all the soldiers were eliminated. In a corner, Winkle suddenly remembered what Montana had told her. Slowly, she began to overcome her fear, wiping away her tears. She raised her gun and started shooting at Alucard. The magic bullets were fired relentlessly, striking Alucard repeatedly. Alucard simply bit into the magic bullets and crushed them with his teeth. At that moment, Winkle's fear was extreme. Alucard grasped Winkle's throat and slowly pierced her heart with a long spear. As Alucard took a bite, Winkle's life came to an end, and all of this was seen through the surveillance footage by Montana. Winkle's death also revealed Alucard's weakness to him. Watching Alucard on the screen, laughing maniacally, Montana delivered a classic speech to his subordinates. Soon, a black dot appeared in the sky above London's moon. People looked up in terror and discovered that the black dot had transformed into three, rapidly devouring the surface of the moon. But when these black dots reached their limit, people finally saw that they were three enormous airships. Unaware residents thought they were watching a science fiction movie. Unaware of the impending disaster, Montana made his final pre-war mobilization. Then, a lightning-fast attack was launched on the entire city of London. Hundreds of unmanned drones were launched from the airships, flying like meteors toward various locations in London. Since they carried incendiary bombs, the entire city soon turned into a hellish inferno. However, these attacks were just the beginning. At Montana's command, the Vampire Legion, consisting of 3,000 individuals, began jumping to the ground one after another. They possessed incredible regenerative abilities and didn't need parachutes. They could randomly land anywhere in the city, due to not having fed for a long time. Montana's command to them was not to fight, but to feast. Men, women, the elderly, and children, any survivors became their prey. Once bitten by them, ordinary people would quickly turn into ghouls. They obediently followed their orders to continue attacking the entire city. But in this moment of crisis, the Combat Command Center is not responding. All communications had been cut off long ago, and the top military officials had turned traitor in their pursuit of immortality. They had joined Montana and become immortal vampires, and took control of everyone here. However, in Integra's eyes, these newly turned vampires were just a bunch of rookies. She immediately ordered Walter to take them out. After learning of Montana's plan, Integra hurriedly returned to the Hellsing headquarters. If she couldn't make it back in time, the entire United Kingdom would soon fall. However, just halfway through the journey, Walter suddenly came to a halt. He sensed a terrifying force ahead, one that even he couldn't guarantee victory against, so he urged Integra to leave as quickly as possible. Seeing Walter in a state of high alert, Integra decided to leave first. As Integra drove away, a figure appeared in front of Walter. He was Captain Bell, Montana's most powerful ace werewolf. Unlike those vampires who were once human, Bell was a born purebred werewolf. When Walter threw his steel wire at him, Bell effortlessly caught it with just one hand. Meanwhile, news of Integra's escape alone had already reached the Vampire Legion in the city. They began pursuit at lightning speed, continuously launching bombs to bombard the area. The shockwaves from the explosions caused vehicles to lose control and come to a stop at the roadside. Facing the Vampire Legion ahead, Integra held her longsword horizontally in front of her, prepared to fight them to the death. Just as a vampire launched an attack, suddenly, a rain of holy Bibles fell from the sky, followed by several steel blades piercing through his body. The newcomer was none other than Father Anderson, the ace warrior from the Vatican's traitor organization. Though Integra is a heretic he must kill, but these vampires in front of him, slaughtering humans, made him even more displeased. With several steel blades in hand, Anderson prepared to launch an attack. Accompanying him were hundreds of priests from the Vatican's traitor organization, each wielding blessed dual pistols. The humans' counterattack officially began at that moment. On the other side, flames resembling angelic beings suddenly appeared in the sky. Terrified people believed it to be the arrival of a savior. What they didn't realize was another group of demons. The Bishop Maxwell of the Vatican Betrayers organization organized a crusade of 2,000 knights and joined this war. High up in the sky, Maxwell proclaimed loudly, "The downfall of London and the Vampire Legion." The Crusade's cannons unleashed indiscriminate attacks on the ground. The overwhelming firepower brought even greater despair. After a sweeping wave, masses of crusaders began gathering on the ground, each wielding shields and long spears, confronting the Vampire Legion ahead. Integra, looking at Maxwell in the sky, trembled with anger. Father Anderson was also furious at Maxwell's actions. He believed that Maxwell was completely intoxicated by power and had forsaken his faith in God. At this moment, Maxwell issued the order to kill Integra. Countless pistols were aimed at her. In a critical moment, a red light flew in. Sarah's arrived just in time, and seeing Sarah's state, Integra knew she has become a real vampire. Now, ordinary priests were no match for her. Just as Anderson was about to launch an attack on Sarah's, suddenly, both of them sensed a familiar aura. On the Thames River not far away, a ghost ship was moving against the current. The person standing at the bow was none other than the king of vampires, Alucard. He swiftly dashed forward, leaped into the air, and landed right in the center of the battlefield. Simultaneously, Bibles scattered in the air, and Anderson appeared, wielding two steel blades. Belle, Montana's ace werewolf enforcer, also jumped down from the airship. At this point, the three most powerful individuals in the series gathered in the center of the battlefield. As long as they didn't make a move, the soldiers on both sides dared not make a move either. Then, Integra on the side issued a command to Alucard. She commanded Alucard not to let these people leave London alive, to stain their flags with their blood. At this moment, everyone felt that something terrible was about to happen, but it was already too late to stop it. All the bullets and attacks seemed to be absorbed by hell itself. This was Alucard's third form after releasing his seal. Zero type, Death River. In an instant, all those who had been bitten by him emerged as undead beings. Tubal Cain and the magic bullet shooter Winkle were the first to launch attacks on the surrounding soldiers. The next moment, a surging river of blood swept through the entire city. Countless undead crawled out from the Death River. He was once the most brutal king in human history, and the origin of the term vampire. 500 years ago, he led his soldiers to sweep across Europe. After the war, he massacred all his soldiers and subjects, turning them into his undead army. Over the course of 500 years, he consumed the blood of 3 million people, transforming himself into a monster with 3 million lives. Since then, he has been known as the King of the Undead. Now, the 3 million undead army unleashed by Alucard from the Death River engulfs both the Vatican's Crusade and Montana's Vampire Legion. They flood the city like a bursting dam, destroying everything in their path. Even the aircraft in the sky are swiftly destroyed. Maxwell, at this point, is already surrounded by the undead. In despair, he eventually dies, and like all the bodies of the Crusaders, he is impaled on a spear. In this moment, the king of vampires from 500 years ago has returned. Suddenly, holy scriptures descend from the sky, and Father Anderson charges forward. However, Anderson is not a match for the unsealed Alucard, but Alucard still considered Anderson an adversary, and hoped that he would kill him. At this moment, Anderson creates distance between them. Several steel blades quickly appear in his hands and are thrown towards Alucard. However, gunshots are heard, and all the blades shatter. Even Anderson's hand is injured. At this moment, Alucard transforms once again. Two specially crafted pistols appear in his hands. He immediately shoots and breaks Anderson's arm with a single shot. But even so, Anderson continues to wield his blades. However, the undead summoned by Alucard block his attacks. Alucard then creates distance between them. Just in an instant, countless undead appear in front of Anderson. At this moment, Anderson bites on his nearly severed left hand and adjusts his fighting stance. He charges towards the undead army. cutting them down one by one like vegetables. He even releases his ultimate move, causing widespread destruction among the undead. In Anderson's heart, there is only one belief: to push forward. Anderson's valor reminds Alucard of those who had once killed him, how he wished Anderson could come before him again and pierce his heart. However, Anderson is ultimately defeated by the endless undead army. His body has reached its limit. A large number of undead knights are charging towards him, as Anderson is about to be impaled by the knights' spears. Suddenly, a barrage of gunshots rings out. One by one, the undead knights are shot and fall to the ground. It turns out that other priests have come to support Anderson, and each of them is willing to sacrifice their lives. Following Anderson with unwavering determination, hundreds of priests charge into the midst of the undead army. If they are surrounded, they will detonate the bombs on their chests, taking the undead down with them. Explosions resound one after another. The undead horde is quickly engulfed in the flames of war. A moment later, Anderson emerged from the smoke. Standing before Alucard, he produced a mysterious box, unveiling his trump card weapon. Determined to attain immortality, Anderson drove a nail into his own heart. But this was no ordinary nail. It was a sacred relic from the Vatican, the very nail that had pierced Jesus. Alucard, a mix of concern and anger, sought to prevent this transformation. It would be too late. The insertion of the nail would turn Anderson into a monstrous embodiment of God's power. He didn't want Anderson to be like him, a plaything for the God's power. However, Anderson paid no heed and saw himself as a divine instrument. Alucard was enraged. He raised his gun to kill Anderson, but in a sudden flash of cold light, Alucard's arm, along with his head, was severed. Alucard raised his gun with his left hand. He shot Anderson's skull with one shot. However, at this moment, both of them are already undead monsters. Both of their bodies are rapidly healing themselves. Anderson once again combined his weapons into a cross. Alucard combined his two guns into a cross-shaped configuration. The battle between two immortal monstrosities commenced, their seemingly fatal injuries healing before the eyes of onlookers. Alucard knew that Anderson's weakness was the wooden dowel in his chest. He raised his gun and shot Anderson in the heart. The bullet was absorbed by the dowel. Anderson leaps up and releases thorns all over his body. He's floating in the air like an angel. Alucard, immediately raise your gun Aver and shoot. But the swift descent of steel blades pierced his head. Thorns emerged from within Alucard's body, transforming into holy fire, purging his sins with relentless intensity. This time, the holy fire swept through. Alucard's millions of undead were soon burned to the ground. Alucard was about to be consumed by Anderson's holy fire. Then came the voice of Ceres. She tried to stop Anderson, but there was nothing she could do. She could only shout loudly, calling out for Alucard. Ceres's voice finally awakened Alucard. As he gazed upon Anderson before him, Alucard conveyed a message to him. He stated that only humans could defeat themselves. But now that Anderson had become a monster, it was impossible to defeat him. No sooner had the words left Alucard's mouth than Anderson's weapon snapped, and the thorns were torn asunder. The runes on Alucard's hand underwent a transformation. Letting out a ferocious roar, he charged towards Anderson. Alucard's palms became like knives, slicing through the thorns in front of him. Swiftly, he reached Anderson's presence. Alucard directly pulled out the heart impaled by the wooden nail and crushed it in his grip. Anderson's body shattered like fragile porcelain. Alucard approached his remains, wanting to bid farewell, but at that moment, a person wrapped in steel wire suddenly appeared. Everyone was taken aback because the person was none other than the butler, Walter. He, who was supposed to be dead, had transformed into his youthful form. Integra couldn't believe that her trusted childhood companion, the butler, would betray her. In reality, Walter had betrayed Hellsing half a century ago. Now, through Montana's vampire technology, his body had been remodeled, returning him to the pinnacle of his youth. All of this was done to defeat Alucard. With anger burning within her, Integra clenched her cigar and issued the final command to Alucard: kill all the enemies. After giving the ultimate command, Integra and Ceres boarded Montana's airship for the final battle. Meanwhile, before Walter and Alucard, a large swarm of bats suddenly converged. Walter swung his steel wire, shredding all the bats around him. Alucard swung his hand knife at Walter, but it's intercepted by the steel wire. With a gentle pull, Walter instantly crushed Alucard's hand. Then, His legs were ensnared by the steel wire as Walter controlled it, slamming Alucard into a nearby gate. Alucard retaliated and unleashed hellhounds, but with a mere wave of his hand, Walter cut it in half. The current Alucard was already weakened from the intense battle with Anderson. Under Walter's relentless assault, Alucard's hands, feet, and even his body were thoroughly shattered. However, at that moment, Walter's modified body began to backfire. His hands trembled, and blood oozed from his mouth and nose. Walter forced his body to approach Alucard and pierced his heart. Suddenly, he realized something was amiss because the person before him wasn't Alucard at all. In the next second, Alucard appeared behind Walter, now in the form of a young girl. And now, it was time for Alucard's true performance. The blood of all the deceased in the entire city began surging towards Alucard. The city transformed into a macabre scene of mountains of corpses and rivers of blood. Countless streams of blood frenziedly entered his body. Not far away, Montana's subordinate, Schrödinger, observed this spectacle with an eerie smile. He then took out a dagger and directly severed his own head, allowing his body to be absorbed by Alucard through the river of blood. At that moment, Integra had already found Montana, but they were separated by a sturdy bulletproof glass barrier. No matter how she attacked, she couldn't break through. Montana was delighted to see Integra again because the most enjoyable performance was about to unfold. He wanted Integra to witness firsthand how he would defeat Alucard. It turned out that Montana led a vampire army to attack London, even orchestrating the confrontation between Alucard and Anderson. All of this was done in order to poison Alucard within his blood river, and that poison was none other than Schrödinger, the cat-like being. After absorbing the blood of the entire city, Alucard's consciousness suddenly became chaotic. Memories from centuries ago began to traverse his mind. After Alucard absorbed Schrödinger, their lives began to merge. Schrödinger is like a cat that can observe itself. It can exist anywhere and also not exist anywhere. With the assimilation of millions of lives and consciousness, Alucard had completely lost himself. He transformed into a cat, lacking self-awareness. Schrödinger allowed his blood to mix within Alucard's body, causing Alucard to disappear from the three-dimensional space due to his inability to observe himself. As Integra realized the truth, she incessantly called out Alucard's name. Ultimately, Alucard vanished, leaving behind only a blood-red rune on the ground. Montana also tasted the sweet taste of victory. He had sacrificed everything to defeat Alucard. For half a century, he had lived for this moment. At this time, Ceres also found Integra, but no matter how she attacked, she couldn't shatter the bulletproof glass barrier before her. An exasperated Ceres removed the cannon from the airship, and the shell pierced through Montana's body. Integra was surprised to find that his body was completely mechanical. That's why Montana doesn't age. Finally, Integra stood before Montana, and without hesitation, she shot him dead. With that, a war spanning a century came to a close. 30 years later, on a night, the elderly Integra was sleeping in her bed. However, in the basement, a stone on a coffin began to tremble. Then, in front of Integra's bed, a demon revealed its bared fangs. Integra suddenly sat up and fired several shots. Ceres rushed in upon hearing the commotion, but when she turned on the lights, she saw who was sitting across from them. It was Alucard, who had disappeared for 30 years. In those 30 years, he had slaughtered all of his 3,442,800 lives, leaving only the last one, so he could return once again. To welcome Alucard's return, Integra offered her own blood for the first time.